What's up, Soul Path? Welcome to episode 6 with Jaime Lehner. I'm pumped for you guys to listen to this one. She's someone that has a mountain of experience with plant medicines, sacred ceremonies, rituals, and also supporting people to integrate their plant medicine experiences on the other side and how to bring all that beauty, the experience from indigenous lineages, and manifest a beautiful life in the modern world. So, without further ado, check out this episode. Drop me a comment on your most valuable insight from this conversation, and I'll see you on the other side.
My name is Marco Petrovic, your host, and today I've got Jaime Lehner on the call. A little bit about Jaime. She's a guide for consciousness exploration, an intuitive and shamanic healer. She guides those on a healing and spiritual awakening path through private sessions, group work, and transformational adventures in Peru and India. Jaime spent the last 10 years working with Amazonian plant medicines and 7 years as an energy healer. Jaime's journey began as an environmental engineer who didn't feel like she was making the impact in the world she knew she was on this planet for. So she dove deep into her own healing, moved to the Amazon for 3 years, and traveled solo through India. In that time, Jaime started working with others to heal and evolve in their work with the plants. In her unique approach, she dives into the realm of consciousness with her clients and the plants, releases blockages, and teaches clients how to bring the information and experience back with them into reality. Jaime recently returned to her birthplace of Santa Fe in the land of enchantment, where she spends her time wandering the desert with her Peruvian pup, Chiricsanango, practicing yoga and meditation, communicating with the plants and the land, writing and renovating her home in the mountains. Jaime, welcome to the call.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. It's great to be here.
I'm curious, what is taking up most of your attention as far as the work that you're doing these days?
Most of my attention? Well, a lot of it feels like communicating to people who, we were talking a little bit about people who go into these plant medicine experiences and how to communicate the process and what's opening up for them and how they can actually harness more of the learning and the transformation as they go, and taking responsibility for this big world of consciousness that opens up. So a lot of my is diving into how different people relate to the experience and how what's a good way to communicate on a broader level to a bigger audience.
How would you define integration?
I would define integration as bringing all sorts of pieces together into a whole. And particularly when we're talking about integration, working with plant medicines, as our consciousness opens up and we go to all these different places in consciousness and other dimensions in our psyche and our emotional body and even in our physical body. So bringing all these pieces and threads of information that we experience back into the present moment, like into our lives, that we can use that wisdom.
When you see people doing this effectively, in what ways do you see them using their wisdom, the ways that are manifested in their lives?
So it's often, not always, but often working with plant medicine is a huge transformation. So their entire lives can evolve, and it can be very quick and abrupt, and it can also be very slow and deep and really soul wrenching. And I see people having to dig deep into wow, why am I here? What am I doing? What is my purpose? And it can take a long time for that whole transformation to happen, because sometimes people have shifts in their home environment, they have shifts in their work environment, their communities, like they start to learn that maybe they don't actually operate in the best way in what they were, the way that they were living. And so as they're doing this integration process, they're learning how they work best, and then how can they alter their reality to support them in their evolution. And it's an ongoing, lifelong learning process.
When it comes to integration, conversations come up a lot with people that I've spoken to on the podcast is, not just the aftermath, but also what people are doing beforehand. And so I'm curious if you could speak to the beforehand for now, and some of the most effective things that you've seen for people to be aware of and perhaps bring into their lives if they're choosing to go down this path.
Yeah. So as I was saying before, this whole process of transformation can start way before any sort of plant medicines. Like the plant medicine experiences can be very big catalyst to move forward in a more rapid pace and a much deeper pace as well. The transformation and having the skills and the tools of how to do transformational work, how to do personal development work. You know, when I work with clients, we look at how they meet stresses and challenges currently in their life, and how do they manage their expectations and their disappointments. And we really get into looking at the mental layers of like what are their beliefs, what are their thoughts, what's going on a daily basis as they move throughout their day. So becoming more aware of how they're interacting in the world and how they're meeting the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we also, you know, we can also look at the emotional aspects, what patterns, what childhood wounds that might be there that they're still living out in their daily life. We can look at their spiritual lives and their connection to their higher self or other, you know, higher consciousness beings, and looking at the physical habits, food, diet, sleeping, things like that. And so having as many practices that we can before we actually get to a plant medicine ceremony can be extremely helpful and very preparatory. So, you know, there's an infinite number of practices out there. You were mentioning earlier, like fasting and detox, you know, that's one way that I got into transformational work myself, actually. Yoga, qigong, like anything that kind of moves energy and starts to shift the consciousness out of a certain held structure, so that you're becoming more aware of things that are outside of your reality. And it's a very much more subtle way than the plants work, but you're learning how it works on a smaller scale before there's a big jump or a big shift when you take plant medicines. So.
Yeah, nice. I really appreciate the way that you phrased that, and I hope I caught it right. Essentially bringing in these practices that move energy outside of everyday like sense of awareness. It's a beautiful way to express it. If people are doing that, so that's a nice way for them to prepare in the lead up to some of these experiences. What's the role of intention through all of this?
Yeah, intention, I feel like, you know, when I was first starting working with these medicines, there was a lot less media around it, and so there was a lot less discussion around intention and why are we doing this. And for me, my personal journey was like, there was just this call. You know, I was on a healing path. I just started a few years before, so I started into these transformational practices. I had a few healers I was working with, and then there was this call. But the call was always for the intention of healing, because I had some, you know, I had some physical and emotional things that I'd been working on, and that was the call. And so as we work with intention in the ceremonies and in the experiences themselves, like there's a way to focus the energy so that as the experience unfolds, the energy and the consciousness can give you some wisdom, information, releasing of blockages around that intention. And it might not always be clear on the other side how that intention was addressed, because, you know, as we know, these plants work in their own intelligence in their own ways. And when you have the plant consciousness meeting the human consciousness, the plant will kind of take the human consciousness into the place that needs to be seen, felt, released. And a lot of times there are themes of the intention, and sometimes you're like, I don't understand where that intention went from. Why did I even have an intention? But usually those people also come away saying, I got exactly what I need.
Once it's all done, and you know, with this podcast, like I've interviewed quite a few people that do work with plants and ceremony, but also come across, like in my own work with clients, quite a number of people that might have a spontaneous awakening. I'd love to open that conversation up a little bit and ask you, for people that are in that situation, or perhaps people that jump into, you know, maybe a 10-day silent retreat or like an extended detox process that can bring about quite a bit of spiritual awakening and expose their conscious to new threads of awareness. What insight would you have for people that are in that situation?
In a lot of ways, can be very similar to people going through the plant medicine experiences. So something has happened spontaneously, or it could have been through a certain major life event, near-death experiences, the death of a loved one, like all sorts of things. And so having this experience where your reality is completely shattered, right? Everything that you thought you knew has disappeared. And then that coming back, that process of integration and coming back, whether it's with the plants or some other spontaneous awakening, it requires a lot of support and process, so the support, ideally external from somebody else who's knows how to go there and who has been in those experiences themselves.
Sure.
And can support the, I think a lot of people question, like, did that actually really happen to me? Am I crazy? Am I going psychotic? But it can support the extremity, the extreme range of what can actually happen and what people can experience, feel, see, sense, and normalizing it in a way that's like, yeah, that's real. That's really what happened to you, not making them crazy for it, or, that basic level of human understanding, because these aren't things that people normally talk about, right?
Yeah.
I still tell some of my stories, this is in plant medicines, but there's so many stories that we don't share and talk about because they're so far out of the norm. And finding people that are able to hold space for that and to be able to continue bringing those threads of wisdom through. And another way I work with clients in integration is like forms of expression, whether that be writing, art, dance, music, something that's bringing it out into a physical form, so that that information is then moving through your consciousness and you can see it and you understand it in a different way, and you might have a meaning or you might have another memory that comes with it. So it's like connecting all the dots, and they won't all be connected, but connecting some of the dots to give you a sense of like comfort and safety in some ways. And as we talked earlier about some energetic practices, so people who have those types of awakenings as well, like getting into understanding how the human energy field works, and how to move the energy and how it interacts with the energy around in the environment is super important to help stabilize. And that would be the other thing, would be the grounding, because with plant medicines and also spontaneous awakenings, there's so much expansion, like the coming back requires a lot of like rest, grounding, more yin activities.
Within this theme of support that you spoke about, what's the role of community?
It depends upon the person, what the person needs. Some of us need a lot more reflection than others. And like I was saying before, a lot of us need a lot more normalization of like, I had this crazy experience, and then somebody else has something slightly similar, and it gives them a little bit more permission to dive in, whereas before they could kind of keep it to the side. So having community that has had some sort of spiritual awakening or plant medicine experience is super valuable. Most of my clients and in my work for myself, when we don't have that community, it can be extremely isolating. And some have delved really deep into the esoteric readings and traditions and made a lot of meaning and sense out of it there, which can be helpful. But it's also very healing in a way to have that human resonance and heart connection, really seeing that this person has had a very profound experience.
For people who have find themselves in the modern world, like you mentioned that in your journey you went and spent 3 years in the jungle.
Initially it was traveling down there for a month or two at a time. And then after I think maybe 5-6 trips, then I ended up staying.
For you, when you were traveling back and forth and then coming back to the modern world, how was that experience and how did you navigate through it?
On a personal journey, it was pretty hard. I didn't really have the community and support. Very few people I even told knew what I was doing. Like some of them had just never heard of it. I did have a kind of a counselor or therapist. It wasn't a licensed therapist, but it was a counselor, and she was able to help me and walk through some of the spiritual processes. But I did seek out a lot of things on my own. I got into yoga and other energetic practices, and I did do a lot of reading, and eventually I built community. But that's part of the reason I ended up staying in Peru for so long, was because I needed to be around that type of community. And I think now it's really changing, because there's so many more people that are taking the leap into this world. And so that people are around, there are integrational circles, there's groups, support groups that can really help ground and balance people out.
So we've been through this before, spoken a little bit in terms of what's valuable for people to do afterwards. I'm curious, with the work that you do with clients, is there like a set process that you walk people through, or what does that look like when you're working with people on the other side of these experiences?
It's pretty unique to the individual. Yes, there's kind of a process, but the actual information and the learning and evolution for each client is very unique. So it gives them a lot of space to share and explore what it was that they actually saw and happened and experienced, and what wisdom they're bringing back. And sometimes we revisit some of the things that happen because there's like a deeper level that they know, or I intuitively know that there's there to explore. And so we can go into their energy fields and kind of help see what was there and what they may have been touching on, or we might actually revisit a whole experience they may have had in a medicine ceremony so that they can better understand what they went through. Because sometimes we come out of these experiences like, I don't know what happened, I remember this tiny little piece and this tiny little piece, and sometimes it's useful to actually go back and revisit some of those things. Another thing is having them be aware of how they feel different, so noticing their own interactions with society and reality, their own changes in thought patterns and beliefs, their own emotional states, their sensations, because a lot of times everything has shifted, and sometimes it's like, I don't know what's shifted, I just feel amazing, or I feel confused, or there's sometimes a blanket explanation, and helping people get in a little deeper to start to notice the more subtle changes, because that also helps them integrate and embody, oh, that shifted, oh, that shifted. It can help them then bring it through their consciousness on a more stable level. And so, each person, we kind of go through these things at differing times. We also bring through visions, or, a lot of people get places in the future, or things, or projects, or desires, or passions, that come through. And so we try to bring that into a more tangible form. And a lot of times that can also come through expression and journaling and art or music. And when they're ready, setting some sort of external actions in the world, and they might not be ready for a while, and that's fine, because these things evolve. But when they feel ready, they might want to take like a step of like, oh yeah, I did really want to like pick up the paintbrush again. I haven't done that in 20 years, or I had this crazy idea about this project I wanted to work on, in this other part of the world, like maybe I should reach out to somebody over there. So just creating like actions, supported actions that they can take to also bring those visions and those passions and their desires out into their reality and the world that they're living in now.
It sounds like extremely thorough and holistic, the work that you're doing. For situations where perhaps someone's wanting to go through this process by themselves, or perhaps not in a situation to fund, working with a therapist or a healer or something like that, is there like some basic stuff that like if you weren't in a position to do all these things, here's like a few simple basic things that if you did this, it would support you in a big way?
Yeah, I would say one thing that's really simple that brings a lot of information is journaling, writing out thoughts, feelings, experiences, emotions, visions, before, after, the whole thing. That's super simple. Some form of body awareness or breath work, super simple, like learning to focus on the inhale and the exhale, allowing the breath into the body and back out, and bringing that awareness. Because when you are in a plant medicine experience, it's have mind body separate. You can have them, it can transform in very many different ways, and having that ability as a tool to go back to the breath, to come back to the body, come back to regulating the nervous system. Very simple. And then you know, even if they're not able to find healing therapy, anything like that, having a way or a support person around emotional processes. Not everybody likes to do this, but I find it extremely helpful where they have a safe person, you know, or it could be through journaling as well, where they can just freely express the emotions if they need to, or just be in the emotion and not have to put on any sort of like mask to be somebody different. Like, very valuable. And it can be, you know, a best friend, it could be your dog, it could be, you know, the tree outside, right? Where you go and you have a place to feel safe and be in your emotion.
I've come across a few situations where people have kind of just found themselves in that situation, feeling very alone or for whatever reason in this journey, and find there's a lot of value for them in those kinds of practices. So a question that I've been asking quite a bit that I'm curious to hear your perspective on is there such a thing as doing too much of this work? And if there is, what would be some valuable flags of awareness for people to be aware of?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it's very individual. Of course, you know, when we get into this work, a lot of us think we can handle more all the time. Like, not everybody. Some people are very cautious. They're not cautious, but like, no, I need to take a break. They're much more aware of when they need to take a break. But we can kind of get sometimes in this cycle of, you know, not quite integrating or understanding what has happened. And so the answer is then, okay, we want more. Okay, we want more. And, you know, unfortunately, what happens is that each time we go through a plant medicine experience, there's a ton of information, a ton of wisdom. And if we don't have the integration and we don't have the awareness, and I'm going to use the word training, it's not quite the right word, but the learning to gather and extract all of that information, is like we can kind of just cycle and keep losing information. And it can be very hard on the body. I'm sure you've seen this before. We're getting, you know, really tired, nutrients depleted, like people are ungrounded, they're not able to sleep or get into different states of worry, fear, anxiety, or they could be the opposite. I mean, they could be totally in bliss or joy, but those aren't people that are usually like, I have to have more and more and more. It's usually the people who get kind of stuck in these cycles of challenging emotions or challenging physical experiences. And I would say that a lot of times what's needed is extra attention and extra focus on what is happening. Not to say that plant medicine experiences can't provide that, but to be careful and watching the constant seeking for the answer without taking a pause and resting and really resetting the whole system, resetting the nervous system, the body, the mind.
When you say paying extra attention on what's happening, can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, this is where the integration practices can be very helpful with the forms of expression, the energetic practices, keeping things moving forward. So getting really curious, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm really stuck, I'm really anxious, you know, what is this anxiety about? You know, where is it coming from? Is this familiar? Like, you know, getting very curious about the experience, because it has a lot of information. A lot of it stems from childhood for most people, or from, you know, generational experiences, and they're just reliving them. And so that's what I mean by like getting curious. And
is there anything that we haven't spoken to that you feel would be really valuable for someone listening to consider or to be aware of?
yeah, one thing that comes up is, you know, this choice to step into these plant medicine experiences. It does come with a responsibility. Like, as we move into these big open spaces of consciousness, these awakenings, looking for healing, there's a lot that can come through on a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, every level. And so with that responsibility, you know, even if it's doing it yourself, or if you have a support system or an integration therapist you work with, understanding that you are in a process, and it's going to take some attention and time, and it's going to be uncomfortable at times, and it's going to suck, and that's part of it. um, and I guess another thing would be, developing your own relationship with how you work with these plants. I think people who are coming into this work that are newer can get caught up in what it's supposed to look like, or what so-and-so's experience is like, and just remembering that, like, you have a very unique consciousness, and the plants are going to work with your consciousness in a very unique way, and everything is happening just for the right reasons, as it should. And if someone on the other side of the room is having a beautiful, blissful experience, and you're over here, very miserable, like, that's part of it. And to just keep trusting, and to be aware of your own relationship with the plant, because it's like having a relationship, with anything else, in this world. It's a little different because it's, coming in at a deeper level of consciousness, but it's a relationship, and your unique way of communicating with that plant, could be through images or sounds or voices, or it could just be like all of a sudden you're just dissolved into that consciousness, and there is no separation between you and the plant. I think just reminding people that everything and anything is possible, and to not discredit or devalue what you experience. There's not a better experience than somebody else.
Yeah, nice. That's a nice one. And you mentioned that you're curious to speak a little bit about the importance of becoming a navigator of your own consciousness. And so I'd love if we could explore that conversation a little bit, and what you mean by that.
Yeah. I mean, kind of is a theme of some of the things we've talked about already. As we expand into altered states of consciousness, like, we're gathering a lot of information, and I use the word a responsibility of how to integrate and bring that information back, and weaving these threads of wisdom, through all sorts of dimensions and aspects of consciousness, to interconnect these realities for your present reality. So learning to navigate your consciousness is just developing that ability, and being aware of, like, that is what you are doing. Because I think this isn't always common, but sometimes people get into this, like, state in life, and also with the plant medicines, that something's being done to them. And I just want to shift that frame into, like, you're actually in a collaboration, and you're in a co-creative experience, and that actually brings a feeling of more like empowerment, because we don't really want to have this super unequal power dynamic. You want people to feel like they are empowered in their own experience. And that's not to say that they want to try to, like, control the experience, because as any of us who've been in those experiences may have tried that, we know it doesn't work. But just to feel like it's a co-creative experience, and many times we understand, or we feel like we're navigating with the plant consciousness in a very fluid way, and sometimes we have to just throw everything out the window. Everything we thought we knew is gone, because now it's whatever, the next transformation, the next initiation, the next paradigm shift, and I think some traditions, kind of see that as a spiritual crisis, where it's like, again, everything just dissolves, and you're left with, I don't know where I am, but I'm here to learn. And so there's a humility that also comes with that, of being able to let go, constantly letting go, and relearning, which is empowering. And so that learning, that process of being able to do both.
What about this other aspect that was mentioned? I'm curious to know if you could expand on this one more, and I'm sure there might be some overlay, but nonetheless, you mentioned this journey of how to become one's own shamanic healer and crafting a toolbox of integration practices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the process of bringing this information back. So through the integration process, you learn a lot about how you work already. Like we inherently, our consciousnesses all work differently. And so by learning and seeing how you're bringing information back, how you're because there's often like these layers, layers and layers. So our consciousness can layer certain beliefs, thoughts, emotions over an experience. And so to be able to see that helps us be able to release them as well. So the more awareness you can see with, the more you can release. And the work that I often do with clients is getting in a more shamanic level, on the energetic level, and kind of pointing out, hey, do you notice this over here? Or hey, do you notice this over here? And so when clients are like, oh yeah, I do, I am more aware of that. And we talked about earlier, if they don't have, external support for whatever reason, they can do this process on their own through some expression, self-reflection, journaling, whatever it might be. Because the more that you have someone else, or you can see for yourself the details, the more information you have going forward in life, and the more information you have going forward into another plant medicine experience. And then the integration kind of like toolbox is just finding the practices that really light you up, or really you get a lot out of, whether it be, energetic practices like qigong, yoga, whatever, breath work, dancing, art. So it's like making sure, because some people kind of get stuck in one, or some people have a hard time because sometimes people aren't familiar with these practices. And so actually getting them to take the leap into trying something new, just keep people trying different ways of bringing more information through. And I think that is a big part of it, especially for people returning back to like a modern society and go back to jobs and work in the cities. And it's hard to find time to like go dancing or go to a yoga class, or sit down and write, or get on your guitar and play a song. But how important that those pieces are to bring all of the wisdom back into your being.
Yeah. And I've got a follow-on question, which I'd love to hear your perspective on. As someone goes along this journey and develops, I said, like a toolbox of, processes and practices that they can work with, is it achievable for someone to get to a point where there's no like long drawn out integration process, but rather that, like something happens in the ceremony and like things click into place by the end of the night or the end of the dieta or whatever they may be going through? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I think so. I think that's probably happening for people, in their first ceremonies as well. So my understanding and belief is that the plants are working on your consciousness at every level. So physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, multidimensional, all the time. Right? I mean, we've heard so many things about how these plants get in and alter our DNA. So these plants are working multidimensionally all through your consciousness. And you might only be aware of one thing. You might be in an emotional process, or you might have a memory, or you might be out in another dimension having a conversation with some other beings, right? But the other things through these other levels are happening at the same time. And so I do think as you moving down this path, you have more ability to, embody more of what's happening. And it doesn't mean you have to be aware of it all, because you might not be aware of it all, but there's a way that you have an ability to, I guess it's just an integration, have an ability to bring that into your life. And we have these experiences, and I'm sure you've had this experience where sometimes after a medicine ceremony, you just completely notice, I just feel different, right? And so that process of, there's both this natural innate integration, and then there's that process of like, actually, I want to investigate this more, or this is still a process, that's calling me. So it's like a balance of both trusting the innate integration process and then taking some responsibility to dive into seeing some things that you might not have seen during the ceremony that could actually help you in your daily life and with your visions and your goals and desires. And
I feel like that's a really beautiful way to cap it off. But just before we do, I'd love to open it to you one more time and ask, is there anything else that you feel is super important for people to be aware of? Something that's on your heart at present that you'd love to share?
Good question. I think what's on my heart at the moment is the consciousness of these beings, these plants. Like, they are sentient beings. Like, they have, they're here to teach and guide and care and love. And sometimes there's this, consumption or consumer behavior with plant medicines, with anything, right? Like, we have, spiritual consumerism as well. But just remembering, like, that these are beings too, and they have such depth of heart and intelligence, and they're wanting to share their wisdom with us humans, because they want to see us grow, evolve, and they don't really want to see us suffering all the time. And then, that being said, I would also share that, trusting your own self and your own intuition, feeling the call to work with these plants, as well as, in the process, in a ceremonial process, like trust yourself, trust the plants. It's a really important relationship that can be really profound and help you a lot in the healing and in the awakening and the transformation.
I feel that theme of trust is a beautiful guiding pillar for people to kind of take home and to complete this interview with. And so I'd love to just give you the opportunity to let people know where can they find you and find out about your work. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, I think the best way would be to just go to my website, and it's my name, which is JaimeLehner.com. And there is just some information about my work with clients and the work with the plants and the energetic healing processes and my own journey, a little bit about my own journey.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Jamie, thank you so much for your time, your effort, the journey that you've been on that's allowed you to share all this information with us.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this all together. This is amazing. So.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning into episode 6. Trust you enjoyed it. As always, please share this with someone that you know can get value from this, that can be supported on their journey. Love to grow the community here at Soul Path. And with that being said, I'll see you for episode 7.